the total investment for us to do that was around $2.3 million, which means on an all-in basis, it cost us about $12 Australian for every ounce of gold that we added. So very, very low cost. And that included not only drilling, but assay and software and resource estimation, all of these things.
Barton Gold Holdings Limited on the Australian Stock Exchange BGD is a junior explorer based in South Australia with an exciting project called the Tunkillia project. And with me now to talk about that is Alex Scanlon, the Managing Director. Hello, Alex.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, and thanks for coming on the program. Now, you've been adding drill rigs, you've got a resource that's increasing, and you're building a growth model. But before we talk about the growth model, just update us on where we are at right now with the new drilling rigs.
Yep, correct. A good opening summary of all that. Look, we're very, very busy on the ground. So earlier this year, at the end of April, we had a resource upgrade for the Tunkillia project. And in that, we did about 11,000 meters of drilling. We added around 189,000 ounces of gold. So that took the total resource to 1.15 million ounces. And one of the sort of more important features about that was actually how efficiently we did that. So the total investment for us to do that was around $2.3 million, which means on an all-in basis, it cost us about $12 Australian for every ounce of gold that we added. So very, very low cost. And that included not only drilling, but assay and software and resource estimation, all of these things. So after that, we actually were presenting this at some conferences. We had a number of institutional groups come forward and say, look, we like the model that you're doing. We have a sort of a staged lower risk development model where we actually leverage an existing mill that we already own. And so we kind of opened a placement, brought a number of new institutional investors in. And with that capital, we've actually kind of re-accelerated some of our growth programs. So we've actually been drilling pretty aggressively at Tunkillia. As you mentioned, we've added a third drilling rig now. Earlier this week, we finished about 7,500 meters of drilling. We'll probably go through 10,000 meters by early next week. So we're drilling 2,000 to 3,000 meters a week now. And the objective is to get sort of north of 15,000 meters of drilling done before the end of this year, and also to put out a resource update. So very, very, very busy.
Now, last time we spoke, which was only a month or so ago, you were planning on a resource upgrade by March next year, but you'll bring that forward now and you've got a resource upgrade this year.
Yeah, so when we think about the areas that we're drilling at that Tunkillia project, we have the core 223 deposit, as it's called. That's that 1.15 million ounces. And we also have 3 new gold zones around it that we have confirmed in the past 18 months or so. So what we've done is we've actually broken the growth drilling programs into essentially 2 work streams. One is extensions of the existing deposit, and 2 is testing to see if we can't actually convert 1 or more of those new gold zones into an entirely new JORC resource. So we're front-ending the extensional drilling, if you will. That's the drilling where you have the benefit of a very strong existing resource and block model. We're front-ending that and seeing if we can't actually tie that up into a resource upgrade before the end of this year. And then essentially the regional work, the regional or sub-regional work on those 3 gold zones that are within a few kilometers of the main deposit, that's a separate work stream where we're going and then building those hopefully resource models. And the idea is we might be able to break that into actually achieve 2 resource upgrades.
Let's talk a second about grade is king. Now, you're a sub 1 gram deposit. Now, the sentiment is for these kind of things that they're really not worth anything. But can we just visit that grade is king and the cost benefits that you see with your operation? Yeah.
Look, probably important to note that my background is I'm not a mining engineer or a geologist or metallurgist. I'm an economist and a structured financier. So I tend to sort of look at things one way, and then we work with really good technical people to say, hey, does the totality of this concept make sense? And one of the interesting things about that concept of grade is king, that is true, but not all the way true, right? So it's grade relative to cost, or the cost ratio relative to grade is king, right? So what is the unit cost? What we're actually really asking ourselves is, what is the unit cost of getting that unit of gold inside that cubic meter out of the ground? And what is the ratio of cost versus economic recovery? So a lot of times when people think grade is king and they say, oh, hey, there's this really exciting 10 or 20 gram intercept, the next breath should say, hey, but it's 400 meters underground and it's 2 meters wide, and there's $1 billion and 100 things that can go wrong between the surface and there. If we think about, the way that we like to look at things, if you actually look around the world, a really significant proportion of the most productive and lowest cost, or therefore most profitable gold operations globally, are 1 gram ore bodies. They're big, broad, open pitable mineralization where you're not constrained in the scalability or your efficiencies that you can get going through a single portal. If you have a big, broad, open pit with continuous mineralization, you can scale up your equipment and essentially bring down your unit operating costs on a per unit basis, whether you're talking about the ounces of gold that's coming out of the ground or the literally bank cubic meters. So big buckets, big movements, big mills processed with efficiencies that are often, 2-3 times as efficient as smaller mills producing high grade from high grade mineralization that's got to come from 1,000 meters underground. So it's all relative. What we like about open pitable is that there's a lot lower risk profile in all respects on that.
Mm. And I guess, in some ways, that may be the attraction for these larger investors that you're seeing coming from offshore. Now, I don't know if viewers know this, but Barton Gold is listed on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, BGD3, and also on the OTCQB venture market at BGD FF. So you've got plenty of access for investors and institutional investors to get involved with the Barton project.
Correct. Yeah. And the interesting thing about both the OTCQB exchange and the Frankfurt exchange, they're actually essentially cross listings. So what they are is essentially a direct portal to our home exchange. And therefore, anybody who is looking at, if anybody likes gold and they like Australia and they say, look, we think Barton Gold is the story or one of the stories that we want to support in the gold space, they can trade during US trading hours, European trading hours, or Australian trading hours, and they can trade in Australian dollars and euro and USD. So it is very accessible. It's a very comfortable way for people to trade. People tend to prefer trading in the home market. And in North America, it's actually quite difficult. I come from the US market, and it's actually surprisingly difficult relative to what we're used to here in Australia or people in Europe. It can be very difficult to buy non-US listed securities inside the US because there's sort of institutional frameworks that really only permit that in many respects. So it's about creating ease of access and opening the doorway to a lot of investors who actually asked us, can you make this easier for us?
And you've still got $4 million worth of concentrate from the cleaning out the Gawler mill, which is, by the way, probably the only mill in that area. Which leads to another question. Would you use that as a toll treatment plant for other organisations or other mining companies that may come across gold in the near future?
The short answer is certainly yes. So we are quite fortunate, as well as being, an explorer in air quotes. We actually are really an advanced asset manager who happens to be operating drill rigs, and we're essentially resetting the mineral resource base to bring on a much larger regional operation. So we own the only gold mill in the region, and that gives us two opportunities. One is, again, leverage to our own assets, as you've noted, but it also does then, as we grow and expand, we expect to put in a second big bulk efficient mill next to Tunkillia, and that would then open our existing central Gawler mill to be able to provide toll milling services for the region. Now, the Central Gawler Creighton is really interesting because it is a globally renowned mining district, but people think of copper and uranium in that sector, right? So we are quite literally across the highway from Olympic Dam and Carapatina and Prominent Hill. And BHP has now consolidated that whole IOCG district. On the other side of the highway is this 130-year-old gold district that we've consolidated. We spent about 3 years doing that very quietly, quite intentionally, very quietly. And when we kind of broke cover, now there's quite a few more people coming in around us. And of course, there is a lot of interesting geology in that area, as we know, it is the Gawler Craton. So, we do anticipate that over time, there will be a lot of opportunity to work with regional neighbors to say, look, you've got a resource, or you think you're on your way to a resource. It doesn't make sense for you to go and build your own mill, or it would be subscale. But hey, we've got the infrastructure, and this can unlock your resources, and we can continue to grow and build the region.
Alex, what a great story. For investors watching, Barton Gold Holdings Limited on the Australian Stock Exchange, BGD, an emerging growth story, as you've just heard. Go and look them up now on the internet, bartongold.com.au, I believe. Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, sir, for joining us today and for the update, and we look forward to this resource upgrade in the near future.
Me too. Yeah, thank you very much.